What up, YouTube? So, I thought I was done. Now I was going to save the rest off until tomorrow. But just reading these book, just reading this book all these years later, it's a lot to try to cope with even to this day. I mean, like, it's a lot because Trayvon Martin passed away in 2012, and it is now 2025, and his story, as well as many others, still upsets a lot of people due to what happened and the justice he seemed to have never gotten. The justice his family never got. It's very upsetting because it's like certain places still live by that stand your ground law. And you think to yourself, where did that shit even come from? Especially as we continue to do our research on Trayvon's story. And it's just a lot. It's just a lot. Because he was 5'11" and 158 pounds. I'm not sure how tall Zimmerman was and how much weight he weighed. At this point, it don't even fucking matter. Um, we all know the truth. You claim that to a neighborhood watch, whatever, a volunteer neighborhood watch person. You spot this young man minding his own damn business. walking from a 7-Eleven, as we read in the last video. Okay, he's wearing a hoodie. He's probably listening to music or talking to somebody on the phone. Matter of fact, I'm guessing he's talking to a girlfriend. He's talking to a girlfriend. And you're saying he appears suspicious. You were told to do one thing, but instead you did another. You follow him in fear and in defense mode. He had to defend himself. Clearly, you thought you was going to get the upper hand. He whooped his ass, and because you was losing the fight, that could have been prevented. You gave him one failed shot to the heart, leaving him in the rain, wet, laying in wet grass, bloodstained shirt. While you going about your business, and then when they claim it was self-defense. I don't even know who the fuck would believe that bullshit. Why do y'all even like, how is it self-defense? And how did he get away with claiming it was self-defense when you motherfucking when you motherfucking was told to do one thing and you decided to do another? They said y'all got the damn the footage from the 7-Eleven. He goes in the store just to get Skittles and a juice. I'm guessing he was thirsty, so the juice was for him and the Skittles was for a cousin or somebody. To be honest, reading this book, I got a lot more information because I did research and I watched some of the court videos, but that was a while ago. And now waiting all this time to read this book, I'm getting a lot more information than what's being told. So we're going to get back into this book because I'm over here looking at Wikipedia right now, but we're going to get back into this book. This is Rest in Power, The Enduring Life of Trayvon Martin by Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. Where we left off was, for if y'all watched the last video, where we left off was um pretty much his mother reaction to getting the bad news. Now we're going back to chapter 4. Tracy, February 27, 2012 to March 8, 2012. So yeah, Trayvon passed on the 26th. So this is pretty much speaking on the next day. This is from the father's account. The police took off and left me with a photo of Trayvon laying dead on the ground. I was distraught, but also desperate for answers. How could this have happened, and what happened? I walked outside of the townhouse and went around the back, about 80 yards, to the spot where the police said my son had died. It was a typical suburban setting, a communal grassy backyard, two dozens of townhouses, with a paved walkway running through it. For those who watch this video, if y'all have the book or if y'all want to read the book, um, and y'all decide to purchase it, whether you're in the whether you're in the Florida area or even if you're not in the Florida area, there's plenty of videos showing location, pictures, stuff like that, so y'all could get at least a clear vision of what's being referred to. The detective told me that he and the two officers with him would return later to do what they call a walkthrough, reenacting the altercation at this very spot where it happened. He asked me not to come outside while they were doing the walkthrough because the person who had shot my son would be there. For some reason, I agreed. Instead of letting emotions run high, I decided that I would leave the house and get away from the scene when the police came with the gunman, thinking at the time, let the police investigate, let justice take its course. Me personally, me personally, I don't like. I'm not a father. I don't have kids. All I have is nieces, nephews. Um, I have godchildren here. There are children that their parents chosen me to be the godfather of. Um, but no, I don't have no children of my own. But I can only imagine what parents who have lost children to gun violence or whatever type of violence would be going through during this time, where you just find out that your child lost their life. Um, The sad thing about it is I have family members that have been shot before, been in a lot of different altercations and stuff like that. By the grace of God, they still here to share their story if they choose to share it. I can't say at this point that I have any family members. Well, I have family members that lost their life, but not at a young age. Any family member I have that lost their life to gun violence or any type of violence, from my understanding, they were older. Um, I had people I know, whether it was living in the same neighborhood or went to the same schools and stuff like that, who lost their life. I believe I spoke on certain situations in previous videos. But yeah, this book is pretty sad. Like I was saying, I don't know, man. I can't. I don't think I've been able to stay in the house, knowing that the person who took my son's life is outside. I I don't know, but there was nothing stopping me from visiting the crime scene before they arrived. So I walked outside, my face still streaked with tears, and I saw nothing. Not one sign that anything had ever happened. The crime scene tape, if there had been ever been any, had been taken up. The evidence that had supposedly been gathered along with Trayvon's body. The sidewalk was clean. There wasn't a single sign that anything had happened in that place a few hours earlier. It was like the shooting had never happened. Yeah, because they trying to clean shit up. And that's why they're trying to clean shit up. That's why I told you not to stand outside or not to go outside. They know what they're doing. As I was standing there, bewildered by how quickly they had erased any sign of my son's death, a television reporter walked up with a small crew. Have you heard about the shooting last night? He asked. Yes, I said, that was my son. And I began to cry again. We had a brief conversation, and then I began knocking on doors. I'm the father of the kid who was shot last night. I said, can you tell me what happened? Most said they didn't see anything, only heard the gunshot, and then they quickly shut the door. My sense of hope. It's crazy. I'm sorry that I keep pausing. It's crazy because a lot of people say they ain't see shit. And this could be in any situation. It could be someone that got shot, somebody that got stabbed, a house fire. It could be anything. A lot of people say they ain't see shit, but then when it's all over the news, all over social media, these same people who told you they ain't see shit before be the main ones all over the place bringing it up, or they wait months later, maybe years later. You just said you ain't see shit, but now you telling majority of the story. It's crazy. It is crazy. My sense of hopelessness and despair deepened. Already I could tell no one seemed to care about a 17-year-old kid shot dead in Sanford, Florida. On Wednesday, February 29th, 2 days later, shooting of Trayvon Martin had received 41 seconds of television coverage on Fox, affiliate channel 35 in Orlando. And the local newspapers gave it a brief mention buried deep in the paper. Boy, 17, shot to death in Sanford during altercation, police say. Read the headline of the Orlando Sentinel, the first and only paper to report the shooting that Wednesday. On the medical examiner's, at the medical examiner's office, Trayvon's body was listed as a John Doe. That's fucked up. Young black male, identity unknown. The body was off limits to me. They were trying to clear shit up. They were trying to cover shit up. It was stored at the Volusia. It was stored at the Volusia County Medical Examiner's office, 33 miles away from Sanford. Sanford is in Seminole County, and the county has its own medical examiner's office right in Sanford. I wonder why they would send Trayvon's body to another county to cover the shit up. No one would explain it to me. When I called the medical examiner's office in Volusia County, I was told they didn't allow visitation, even for next of kin. So I wasn't able to see my son's body. Why? Why wasn't I able to see my son? What had they done to my baby? Child. It was now 48 hours since my son's death. Sabrina had insisted that I see the body to be 100% certain that it was Trayvon who had been shot and killed, but I was turned away from seeing the body, much less collecting it. I was determined not to leave Sanford until his body was released and my son was headed home to Miami for his final rest. His clothes and belongings, everything from $22 in his pants pocket to a bag of candy and his hoodie to his earbuds and cell phone, were bagged as evidence and held by the Sanford Police Department. But his body was stuck in Volusia County and would be until the Sanford Police Department sent a letter along with the crime scene photos positively identifying the body of Trayvon Martin. For 2 days, the body, along with questions over why my son was shot, lay in limbo. On the morning of Tuesday, February 28th, not knowing what to do or who else to contact, I decided to go to the Sanford Police Department. I was still in shock. I couldn't drive. I couldn't speak. Brittany drove me to the police station. It was morning. I don't remember the exact time. No one took notice of me, a 6'3", 200-pound black man walking to the police station in sweatpants, a long sleeve t-shirt, and a baseball cap with Brandy at my side. Good morning. I'm Tracy Martin, I told the receptionist, asking to see Detective Chris Sereno. She called someone upstairs, and soon Detective Sereno arrived. Again, wearing a white button-down shirt and loosened tie, and guided us to the conference room. All I knew at this point was that there had been an altercation and that Trayvon had been shot and killed. Now in the conference room, the detective elaborated on what had happened on the night of February 26, 2012. Mm. I would have wanted to know then and there. I don't want to wait all this time later for y'all to finally tell me what happened to my motherfucking son. Then this motherfucker's outside, not in jail, not in handcuffs. He's outside. Y'all telling me to stay in the house because he's outside? The fuck? He told me that Trayvon was walking back from 7-Eleven when the altercation occurred. I asked the detective who killed Trayvon. He said the man's name, George Zimmerman, but I will refer to him from this point forward as who he is, the killer. He was a 28-year-old volunteer neighborhood watch coordinator at the retreat at Twin Lakes. He was also a student at Seminole State College working on a degree in criminal justice, a detective told me, adding that the killer had never been arrested for anything in his life. This guy's squeaky clean, the detective told me. What the fuck that guy do with anything? Detective Sereno told me the killer's version of the altercation. He was sitting in his vehicle behind tinted windows. Trayvon was walking along the sidewalk, coming back from the 7-Eleven. The killer began trailing Trayvon in his car. Trayvon turned and walked up to the killer's car and asked, "Why are you following me?" The killer rolled down his window and said, "I'm not following you." Trayvon then supposedly asked him, "Do you have a problem?" Then the killer replied, "I don't have a problem." Trayvon began running. The killer got out of his truck and came around one of the buildings. Trayvon walked up to him again and said, according to the detective, "What's your problem, Holmes?" "I don't have a problem," said the killer. "You got a problem now," Trayvon allegedly said, at which point the killer put his hand in his pocket to retrieve his cell phone, and the detective said Trayvon sucker punched the 28-year-old, knocking him to the ground. And here the detective said, "My 17-year-old son began beating the neighborhood watch coordinator, covering his mouth with his hand and telling him shut the fuck up, while pounding his head into the sidewalk pavement." While they were struggling on the ground, the killer grabbed his pistol and shot Trayvon once through the chest. According to the detective, after Trayvon was shot, he put his hands out and said, "You got me, Holmes." It sounded like something out of a bad movie, and it didn't sound anything at all like my son. I told the detective that Trayvon wouldn't just walk up to a stranger's car out of the blue and ask, "Do you have a problem?" That was the first thing I questioned. Knowing my son, he wouldn't just go up and confront, much less attack a stranger. "Have you arrested this man?" I asked. "No," he said. "We're interviewing him." The fuck? He added that the killer had a license to carry a gun. "Did you do a background check on my son?" I asked, remembering what the detective had told me about the killer having a squeaky clean record. "Yes," we replied. He replied, and Trayvon's juvenile record was, of course, clean. Just because this guy has a squeaky clean background and a license to carry a gun, does that give him the right to kill my son? I asked. "Sir, it certainly does not give him the right," said Detective Sereno. He added that he was a father too, and he told me that he didn't believe the killer's story. I want to interview him again and catch him in a lie. He said the story didn't make sense. But at this point, I was focused on getting my son's body released so we could get him back to Miami for the funeral. I asked Detective Sereno if he could contact Volusia, the Volusia County Medical Examiner Office so I could arrange to transport Trayvon back to Miami. Sorry, y'all. He said he would do his best to help get the body released. Then the detective led Brandy and me to a cubicle. I had something I want you to listen to, he said, and he began setting up some audio files on his computer. I had no idea what he was about to play for me, which turned out to be parts, short snippets of the 911 tapes of several neighbors who called the police to report that two men were involved in a fight at the retreat at Twin Lakes on the evening of February 26th. Brace yourself, the detective told Brandy and me. You'll hear screams. You'll hear the shot. Then he hit play. The calls were to report the altercation, and you could hear it still going on in the background on the tapes. The sound was at times fuzzy. Still, listening to these tapes was horrifying. I was actually listening to my son being shot and killed. The detective played a few seconds of one tape, a few seconds of another tape. This one has some screams on it, he said. He leaned in closer again. There was a lot of commotion on the tape, but you could clearly hear what I knew were death screams. The last ones of Trayvon's life. These screams, still haunt me and are impossible for me to describe. I heard a shriek, a howl. I thought it sounded like the word help. It was followed by the sound of a gunshot. The single fatal shot that took the life out of my son. Was this your son screaming? The detective asked me when the tape went silent. I was shaken up in a daze, as anyone would be after hearing the screams and a shot that led to the death of their child. I shook my head like, man, I don't know. Later, the detective would say I shook my head and said no, meaning it wasn't my son screaming, meaning the screams came from the killer. At that moment, however, I couldn't tell for sure who was screaming, and hearing those screams for the first time, I didn't want to know. I didn't ask him to play the tapes over again so I could identify which screams were Trayvon's and which belonged to the man who shot him. I don't want to hear it anymore, I said. Detective Sereno assured me that he would do everything that he could to arrest the man who killed my son and said that he wanted to interview him again and catch him in a lie. More bad news followed. Not only would there not be an arrest for the man who shot my son, I would soon learn that the Sanford Police Department allowed Trayvon's killer to walk out of the police station and go home to his bed while Trayvon's body remained at the Volusia County Medical Examiner's office. I felt hopeless, powerless, facing a situation that I just couldn't understand. My son was dead. The man who shot him walked free, and no one seemed to be doing anything about it. I didn't know where to run, where to turn. 3 days after the shooting, I was still in Sanford, still trying to get my son's body released. I was expressing my frustration to my brother Steve. He said, "Give Patricia a call." He is referring to Patricia Jones. She's a lawyer, now a legal advisor for the Miami-Dade Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but back then she was an assistant public defender working with people who couldn't afford to hire private attorneys. She once worked as a criminal defense attorney. Patricia was also a family member. She had known Trayvon since the day he was born. "Tracy, what's going on?" Patricia asked me over the phone. I tried to explain the shooting, the aftermath, the confusion, the lack of an arrest. I could barely talk about it. The shock was still too fresh. Patricia shook me from my stupor stupor. I don't know. "Something's not right, Tracy," she said after I told her the story the best I could. "We had to apply some pressure." "Okay," I managed to say, "but how?" "I need you to call Ben Crump," she said. Then she told me a little about Benjamin Crump. Crump, at the age of 42, had already become one of the most prominent African American attorneys in the country. He was born in Lumberton, North Carolina, the eldest of 9 kids. He had at first noticed racial inequality in fifth grade the same way a lot of us first noticed it. He looked around. He asked his mom, "Why do people on the side of the tracks have it so much better than people on our side of the tracks?" Since 1997, he had fought and won some of the most important recent civil rights cases, along with Darrell Parks, his partner at their Tallahassee law firm, Parks and Crump. Crump had taken in a wrongful death case against the state of Florida for the parents of Martin Lee Anderson, a 14-year-old who died in early 2006 after being kicked and beaten by guards at the Bay County Sheriff's Office juvenile boot camp in Panama City, Florida, and won more than $10 million in settlements. After the guards who beat Anderson were tried and acquitted, Trump told the media, "You still a dog. You go to jail. You kill a little black boy and nothing happens. I mean, you kill a dog, you go to jail. You kill a little black boy and nothing happens." Crump's law firm motto is we help David fight Goliath and win. Patricia told me she would contact Benjamin Crump on my behalf. In early March 2012, Crump was busy in court as usual, working on another civil rights case. But Patricia kept calling him, leaving messages, sending texts and emails. She became a thorn in his side. Finally, Crump called back. What is it? He asked Patricia during a lunch break. Why do you keep calling me? Well, you're the only person for this case, said Patricia. But what's the case? Crump asked. She gave him a background about Trayvon shooting and then asked Crump if he would talk to me so I could give him the story from my point of view. Shortly after that, I was on the phone with Attorney Crump. I was still in shock, and my manner was meek and mild. I was still barely able to speak about what had happened to my son. Trayvon was 17 years old, I told him. He was walking from a 7-Eleven. A neighborhood watch volunteer pulled a 9mm pistol and shot and killed him. The police said Trayvon was unarmed. And the police also said they weren't going to arrest the man who shot him. All my son had was a bag of Skittles and a can of iced tea. Cover up. Cover up. He had a can of watermelon. He had a can of Arizona watermelon syrup drink. Why are they saying iced tea? But they claim they don't want to be racist. Unarmed, 17 years old, walking from the store with just a drink and some candy. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Hold on a sec, Crump. Let me make sure I understand this. Your son was walking home. He was unarmed. The neighborhood watch volunteer had a 9mm pistol. Yes, sir, I said, and he shot my son in the heart. There was a long silence. You don't need me on this case, Crump finally said. I'm an officer of the court, and we see people all the time. People with no evidence against them at all get arrested on a innuendo, on a suspicion, on if somebody said you look like somebody, but here you got a person who has a proverbial smoking gun in his hand with an unarmed teenager dead on the ground. He took a breath. Of course, they're going to arrest him, he said. Then he repeated, you don't need me to, on this case, Mr. Martin. Give it a couple of days. They are going to arrest him. Trump went back to his case. I went back to trying to get my son's body released for his funeral in Miami, believing justice would prevail and the killer of my son would soon be arrested. Or prevail, I'm sorry. I have a close and longtime friend at Roy Mazel and Kurt's funeral home in Fort Lauderdale. Cameron Mazel. I called him from Sanford asking for a favor. Trayvon was killed and we need to get the body back home, I told him. Could you pick him up from Volusia County, drive him home, and get him ready for the funeral on Sunday? On Saturday, I asked, meaning Saturday, March 3rd, which was only a few days away. Yes, of course, he said. Before I drove back to Miami, I made one last call to the Sanford Police Department, letting Detective Sereno know that I wasn't satisfied with the answers I had received about Trayvon's death, and that I would be back after I laid my baby to rest. The funeral home sent what is called a first call car, a van with out windows, specifically fitted with a stretcher on the inside to hold a body that's being transported to a funeral home for a bombing. They picked up the body at the morgue in Volusia County and transferred it to the van, which took my son to on his last ride back home. The funeral home representatives called me once they were on the road. Only after I knew for certain the body had been picked up did I start driving back home. On the way, I asked the funeral home director if it would be okay for me to see Trey as soon as they got him back home. He warned me that it wouldn't be a good idea because the body had been in the cooler and it would not be a pretty sight. You wouldn't want to see a loved one in that state, he said. That's not how you would want to remember your child. The idea of my son's body sitting in the car for days in that state hit me like a punch. But I took his advice and waited until they prepared him. Fuck that. I don't give a fuck. I'm seeing something. As soon as I pulled into town, I drove over to Sabrina's house, carrying a picture that the police detective had given me of Trayvon lying dead on the ground. Even though Trayvon's body was nailed back in Miami, Sabrina and her family still couldn't or wouldn't believe that he was dead. Tracy, obvious? Are you absolutely sure? Sabrina's sister asked me. I asked her if she wanted to see the picture that the police had shown me. She said she did, and one of Sabrina's brothers did too. So I showed them the picture, but Sabrina couldn't look at it. She wasn't in a state to do anything. I gave two friends a shopping list, and they went out to buy Trayvon's last outfit, the clothes he would wear in his casket. I wanted him to wear white with powder blue essence because those are the colors Trayvon told me he wanted to wear to his high school prom. My friends found him a white suit and a powder blue necktie and vest at a mall in Fort Lauderdale. I met them at the mall, and Sabrina and I went to a funeral home. where we picked out a baby blue casket lined in white with his name engraved on it. Now I had to choose his gravesite. I went to the Day Memorial Park in North Miami, where my mom, dad, and grandmother and other family members were laid to rest. A member of the cemetery staff drove me around on a golf course looking for what he called a decent plot. We drove around for a while and eventually pulled over. We got off the golf cart and walked toward an empty plot, a path forcing us to walk over other people's graves. I stopped. No, I don't want Trayvon buried in the ground. I didn't want to imagine anyone walking across his grave. A member of the cemetery staff told me about the mausoleum, where, in by coincidence, Trayvon's great grandmother Nettie Spofford and his cousin Corey Johnson were buried. Corey's fiance had purchased a space in the mausoleum right next to Corey. Once she heard about Trayvon's shooting, she offered to help us however she could. Meanwhile, we were still at the cemetery. She called me to, she called me up and said, Tracy, I heard you were looking for a plot. I offered to purchase the plot in the mausoleum next to Corey from her. We will lay Trayvon to rest there. Hmm. This is a lot. This is a lot. This is a lot. Hold on. Some of the chapters is pretty long. Our fight to find the truth about what happened to our son continued throughout the preparations for his funeral. Attorney Crump still hadn't agreed to work on our case, but he did send his associate, a young civil rights attorney named Jasmine Rand, down from Tallahassee to meet with us. On the day she came, the house was filled with family and food and a feeling of almost unbearable grief. Being a young attorney, she was nervous about meeting us, not just because it was such an emotional time, but also because Jasmine is white. She later told me that before she opened the door, she was anxious about how she would be perceived and wondered if we'd be resentful toward her because, as far as we knew, a white person had killed our son. I mean, had just killed our son. Sorry. Whew. This is a lot, but I'm going to do my best to get through it. But the last thing on our minds was the color of her skin. We were still shell shocked, still numb, but already some of our strength was returning. We were focused on getting answers, and if Jasmine was going to help, we welcomed her. Jasmine ran, called my cell phone from her car on her way to meet us. She was headed to Sabrina's house, and I had to apologize. We were running late because I was in the mall picking out the suit in which to bury Trayvon. For a moment, no one spoke. I think the pain of that surreal moment ra- radiated from one end of the phone to the other. Jasmine asked me to please not apologize and said that she would be ready to meet whenever it would be convenient for us. We met later that same day. Sabrina Gerards and I took the attorney to Gerard's room, where we told her what details we knew about what had happened to our son. And then she told us what she thought she and Parks and Crump could do for us. If they decide to accept the case, I can promise that Benjamin Crump, Daryl Parks, and I will fight harder than anyone to have the killer arrested. She said, adding that even with those efforts, no specific outcome would be guaranteed. And it could be guaranteed. But if it's going to happen, she said it would happen with Ben Crump. We signed the papers for the Parks and Crump law firm to take our case. Mm. So I'm guessing that they had to wait until um, the funeral to see Trayvon's body because no one allowed them to see the body up until the funeral. This is crazy. And then another thing is this book actually don't have no pictures of them, no pictures of Trayvon. It's just the story throughout. The viewing at Richardson Funeral Home in Miami was on Friday, March 2nd. So many people came to view the body. Trayvon's family, friends, and classmates, as well as friends of the family. Our family arrived last. I walked through the crowd of mourners and began the longest walk of my life down the funeral home aisle towards my son's open casket. I approached the casket and saw Trayvon lying there, his face placid, his body uncharacteristically still, and his white suit showing no sign of the violence that had prematurely snuffed out his young life. He actually looked at peace. I leaned over and kissed him on his lips. They were cold. I rubbed his hands. Cold. I broke down sobbing. I stood there holding on to the casket, feeling that something deep and essential, something irreplaceable had been stolen from me that I could never get back. My bad, y'all. I'm over here. I don't know what the hell I was doing. I done just blacked out and just started doing all types of. I don't know. All right, let me get back to this book because I done blacked out. I leaned over and kissed him on his lips. They were cold. I rubbed his hands, cold. I broke down sobbing. I stood there holding onto the casket, feeling like something deep in the scent, and so something irreplaceable had been stolen from me that I could never get back. I fell hard to a dark, dark place. As much as I wanted to speak to all the people gathered there to join us in mourning and comfort, I couldn't speak. I felt that no one could fully understand the pain of what I was going through, and I didn't have the words to make it clear. I was being eaten alive. I was so close to his body, but would never see my son again in his life. In his life. My best friend Tommy Lindell stood by my side, and as close as we were, he couldn't even find a way to comfort me. I was trying to be strong for my family, and they were all right there for me. Brandy and her family, my brothers and sisters, Sabrina and Gerardus, all of my family and friends, but nothing and nobody could save me from my soul now. Mm-mm-mm-mm. This is a lie. Oh, this is a lie. Like I said, you hear a lot of shit when it comes to what's on the news, what's been out. Me personally, I'm just learning a lot because there's a lot of different videos telling sides of the story, court videos, all types of shit, documentaries that I'm still trying to find and watch. It's a lot when it comes to the Trayvon Martin story. To be honest, I don't know why there wasn't a Woman of the Movement Part 2, because I know they did Emmett Till first. I thought it'd be a series where it's like different parts speaking on different stories. And me personally, I feel like I don't know if they plan on there or what's going on. I mean, they got documentaries and stuff, but I really do think that Trayvon Martin deserves a movie with his family's approval. But I would love to watch a Trayvon Martin movie. I want to know the full story. I, I want to know every detail, whatever the family feel comfortable with sharing. I feel like a movie should have been out. I really do. I feel like this movie should have been out. I don't know. The next day, our family arrived at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Miami Gardens for the funeral, and two limousines provided by the funeral home. I rode with Sabrina Gerardis and two of my other children, Takira and Demetrius, as other family members walked out of the first limo and into the sanctuary. We gathered our thoughts and tried to calm our emotions. The church could hold more than 1,000 people, we were told, but it had apparently swelled past its capacity, and people were lined up outside. A lot of them were there for us, and to see Trayvon, who many knew as Slim, for the last time. But there were strangers too. As of yet, nobody really knew the story of what brought us to this point, only the stray details that were being passed along by word of mouth and a handful of sketchy news stories that had come out. A young man had been shot and killed, but they had all come to bear witness. I was dazed, but moved that so many people had come to remember our son. I looked over at Sabrina, who seemed closed inside herself, her face lined with the suffering of the previous days. I looked down at the flower on my suit to make sure it was on straight. Sabrina and I and our whole family all wore white. My suit was in the same style as the one Trayvon wore. I took off my suit after the funeral and placed it in a plastic bag with the flower still pinned to the label. I would never wear it again. Oh wow. Finally, our limbo door was open. We got out and walked up to the front steps of the church. It's crazy. I hate, I don't want to say I hate, but I was always terrified of funerals growing up. Now I went to a certain few, and I had to start watching them on YouTube and watching funeral scenes and movies and stuff like that. Now I really don't think that watching funeral scenes and movies ain't really bother me, but being at the actual funeral for a loved one or whoever funeral I went to, I got emotional. And it got up into the point where I was older. I would try not to cry. But the longer I held it in, it eventually broke out. I swear I don't like funerals. I don't. And like I said, I've been to a certain few. And then like last year, of course, I went to my Aunt Trina's and um that was the only funeral I ever went to where the body was cremated. Like that's a wild story. It is. It's a wild story. But to make a wild story short, of course we was at the hospital. Then a while later, they're saying that they're going to do a viewing for anyone that last wanted to see her. I'm not going to speak too much on the viewing. Um, then, like I said in previous videos, they had some little Facebook chat group or something where the family was included, where I guess they're talking about the funeral and reminiscing about moments about my aunt. I don't know why, but I was not included in this group. I don't know nothing about the whole group. Um, the only how I found out that my family was going to do a funeral is because my uncle Benny post the flyer on Facebook, and that's how I found out that they still was going to do a memorial service after the viewing. Because to be honest, I was looking at it like, what's the point? I mean, everybody's saying she getting cremated, so what is the point of a memorial service? They should have did that during the day they did the viewing. But that's a whole nother story. Like I said, I don't really want to get into it because it's a lot of negative opinions. Just reading this book, it made me think about a lot. But anywho, all right. So it says finally, our limo door was open, and we got out and walked up the front steps of the church. We were all crying. The doors to the church opened, and the choir was singing. But I couldn't hear or see anything but the casket resting at the altar at the front of the church. I was led to my seat, too hurt to even know what I was doing. I only gradually, remember the funeral service led by Pastor Ludens Robertson. He recited Psalms 89, 90, and 91, Psalms about strength, trust in God, and the power we have to rise even above death. Although he didn't know Trayvon or the circumstances of his death, the pastor read from Joel 36:15, which details with unexpected tragedy and loss. Which deals. I said details. I'm sorry. It says which deals. Um, but those who suffer, he delivers in their suffering. He speaks to them in their affliction. The congregation rose and one passed by Trayvon's casket, taking the last moment to pay their respects to our son, who was also a son of our community, a son of our city. Many of the mourners stepped by the first row where we stood. Where we said to give us a hug or a kiss and offer words of comfort. I accepted it all in a daze as we prepared to leave the church for the cemetery. I broke down again, knowing that when the casket closed, I would never see Trayvon again. Not in this life. We left the church and climbed back into the limousine. Sabrina, Gerard's, Takara, Demetrius, and I were driven to Dade Memorial Park, passed through the alley of glorious old trees and up to the sturdy mausoleum, a pink granite wall of graves. The pallbearers, which included two of my nephews, Sabrina's nephews, and a few of Trayvon's friends, lifted his casket from the hearse and walked it to the wall as the pastor began reciting verses and prayers. As much as it pleases God Almighty to take upon himself the soul of our dear brother Trayvon Martin, we now commit his body to the ground, said the pastor. Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and the sure and certain hope of the resurrection of the dead, he continued. For the Lord himself to descend from heaven with the shout with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise. With that, Trayvon's casket was slid into the mausoleum drawer and sealed up. We all stood there for a moment and felt something missing from among us, an absence, an aching. And then there it was again, the silence. No trumpet calls, no shouts of outrage, no arrest, nothing, only silence. Hold on, y'all. This is crazy. At the funeral, my sense of hopelessness and despair deepened, and I called Benjamin Crump again. Attorney Crump, it's Tracy Martin, I said. When we talked before, you said that if they didn't do anything, to call you back and you will help me. They didn't arrest him, Crump asked. I could hear shock and surprise in his voice. No, sir, I said, reporting back to him what I heard from the Sanford police. They told me that because of this thing called the stand your ground law, they're not going to arrest him. Trump said that was odd. Stand your ground. I come to find out is a law in Florida and more than 2 dozen other states that allows the use of force when someone is faced with the fear of death or great bodily harm. Mr. Martin, I'm going to help you, he immediately said. Trump would later tell his associates that he was going to try to help us, the family of Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old killed by a neighborhood watchman in Sanford, Florida. Apparently, the news didn't exactly bring cheers of support. It was another non-high producing case in lawyer terms in which attorneys would spend their time, money, and resources on a case in which probably no arrest would ever be made or settlement won. You're probably right, Crump told his associates, but we got to do something about this. He instructed Jasmine Rand to try to put some pressure on the Sanford police to do the right thing. Crump still hadn't officially taken on the case. But he called me back for more information. I told him everything I knew, which at that point was still very little. I went down to the Sanford Police Department, I said, and they let me hear the 911 tape to identify the voices. He cut me off. There are 911 tapes, yes. Yes, there are 911 tapes where you can hear screaming in a gunshot. Shortly after that, Sheriff of Police Billy held a press conference to announce that there were no immediate plans to arrest the killer for the shooting of our son. That's the moment Crump fully committed to taking on our case. I would later discover I was on the phone with him at the time and heard him yelling down the hall of the law office to Jasmine Reed. Draft a lawsuit, he said. What lawsuit? Jasmine asked. The chief of police just announced he's not arresting George Zimmerman for killing Trayvon. He held a press conference. Trump told Jasmine, can you believe it? The press conference to remind the people of Sanford that our people's lives don't matter. Now it's time for us to remind him that we do matter. Trump told Jasmine to write the public records lawsuit to sue the Sanford Police Department for a copy of the 911 tapes. That's impossible. We haven't even sent the public records request yet. So the suit is not right, meaning right to be filed, Jasmine said. To which Crump responded, we'll write a public records request for the 911 tapes, fax it, and then write the lawsuit. But don't we need to give them time to respond before I file the lawsuit? Jasmine asked. Trump's answer was simple, no. The message from Billy earlier today was all he needed to hear in order to know what he now needed to know. 2 days later, Crump received a call from the Sanford Police Department attorney. They wouldn't release the tapes, they said, because the case is still in active investigation. Jasmine already had the lawsuit ready to file, demanding that we, as Trayvon parents, had the right to view the photographs of him and listen to any audio recordings of his last moments, including visual or audio depiction. I want them to know I mean business, Crump told Omid and Sabrina. They're not going to sweep Trayvon Martin's death under the rug. I met with Benjamin Crump for the first time in person in Stanford a few days later. He was an interesting character. He was clearly well educated and wore a sharp business suit, but he also had a sort of deep Southern accent that some people associate with uneducated individuals. but the words would just flow, not like honey, but in a sharp rhythm, like a beat of a drum. He wasn't aggressive or edgy or slick. He was polite but efficient. Clearly a dog hard worker. He apologized several times for telling me in our first encounter that they were going to arrest the man who killed my son. Hey man, I apologize. He said, I figured a kid with a bag of Skittles and a can of iced tea getting shot and killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer. I thought it was a no brainer that they would arrest the man who shot your son. It was less than 2 weeks after Trayvon's death, and Crump, as we came to call him, had already come up with a strategy on how to bring attention to Trayvon's death, apply pressure on the police to arrest the man who had killed him, and expose the truth of what happened the night in Sanford. Now I think about it, this is pretty much similar to watching the Emmett Till movies. How it was seeing like no one cared about the case, and then it got to the point where the parents had to do everything they can and reach out to whoever they could because they knew they wasn't going to arrest the murderers. The only difference is this guy is Hispanic. His plan was to take the case to me. Attorney Crump put me on the phone with. Hold on. All right, so I see that the law. All right, did that. Hold on, y'all. Let me read this real quick. All right, y'all. Let me get back to this book. The same was a safety case to me. Attorney Crump put me on the phone with Ryan Jillison, the media specialist who had previously worked with an attorney named Natalie Jackson, a lawyer who worked with Crump on cases from her office in Orlando. Jillison ran a one-man public relations what cons- consultancy in Orlando. Even over the phone, I immediately had confidence in Ryan Jillison, who seemed like a smart and savvy media wizard ready to bring his time and experience to our case. Jillison had been in a public relations business for more than 20 years, but the economic crisis in 2008 wiped out his job as the head of communications for an Orlando real estate company. He decided to start his own media consulting firm, and along with his normal clients, he found a sector that desperately needed a person of his experience working with fraternities who represented regular people in need of assistance. He had worked with a variety of families, not in civil rights cases, but what he called regular people in trouble, which Jillison heard our story. He wanted to help, and he began volunteering his time, connections, and knowledge. On the phone with Ryan, I was so emotional, feeling hopeless, and still having trouble expressing myself. I managed to tell Ryan that I was frustrated that the media didn't seem interested in the death of my son. Ryan told me that he and Ben Crump might be able to change that and shine a national spotlight on my son's death. Both of these men felt so strongly about this that they would donate their time to our cause for free. But in exchange, we would have to be willing to go in front of the media and tell our story. As I said before, I'm a truck driver. I had never spoken into a media microphone, never done a newspaper interview, not local, not regional, much less national. But I was prepared to do whatever it took to get answers and hopefully find justice. It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to relive your grief every day, answering the same questions over and over again. Ryan Johnson told me right there at the beginning. Every one of these media interviews can be evasive. But this is the only way for you to find justice. You are going to have to express your emotions and your inner grief. You're going to have to be incredibly strong to go out and bury your soul in your quest for justice. I understand. I said I'm ready. I'm not. I'm not sure I was at that point. Trayvon was an unknown teenager killed with a can of fruit tea and a bag of Skittles. We had just let's put a face to the story. I mean, we had to put a face to that story and give it an emotional life. We had to make people care. The media was interested in photos of Trayvon. We gave Ryan Jellison what we had that was easily accessible. The photos were used in his funeral program. The photos were used in his funeral program. We sent those photos to various members of the media. The one that would turn out to be published the most was the picture of him in his red Hollister T-shirt. Some would later accuse us of trying to confuse people by using a photo of him when he was much younger to pretend that he was smaller and less developed than he really was. But that's not the case. We simply provided the media with photographs we had access to, and they chose what they wanted to run. That was the first move. But we couldn't help. But we couldn't stop with the photo or press release. Now that people had a face to attach to the name, we needed to tell the story of the human being behind that picture. It wasn't an easy story to tell. Initially, some editors, reporters, and producers weren't interested. Others were reluctant to be the first to make a story out of the case of a young black man shot by a white neighborhood watch volunteer. We heard that one editor called it a simple, everyday story of a fight going bad. The media didn't go looking for the story, so we had to go looking for the media. The fuse began burning on March 7th, 10 days after Trayvon's death, when the first national media coverage about the case appeared on the Reuters news service, followed the next morning by a report that aired on CBS this morning. How much more I gotta read? This is a lot. Alright, I got it. Alright. I'm gonna try to get through it. Family of Florida boy killed by neighborhood watch seeks arrest by Barbara Liston, Orlando, Florida. The family of a 17-year-old African American boy shot to death last month in his gated Florida community by a white neighborhood watch captain wants to see a captain arrested, the family lawyer said on Wednesday. Trayvon was shot dead after he took a break from watching NBA All-Star Game television coverage to walk 10 minutes to a convenience store to buy snacks, including Skittles candy. The family's lawyer, Ben Crump, said. He was a good kid, Crump said in an interview, adding that the family would issue a call to the watch captain's arrest at the news conference on Thursday. On his way home, a neighborhood watch loose cannon shot and killed him. Trayvon, who lived in Miami with his mother, had been visiting his father in a gated townhouse community called The Retreat at Twin Lakes in Sanford, 20 miles north of Orlando. As Trayvon returned to his townhouse, Sanford police received a 911 call reporting a suspicious person. Although names were blacked out on a police report, Crump and media reports at the time of the shooting identified the caller as George Zimmerman, who is listed in the community's newsletter as a neighborhood watch captain. Without wanting the police to arrive, without waiting for the police to arrive, Crump said Zimmerman confronted Trayvon, who was on the sidewalk near his home. By the time police got there, Trayvon was dead of a single gunshot to the chest. What did the police find? And I can't talk. What did the police find in his pocket? Skittles, Crump said. A can of Arizona iced tea in his jacket pocket and Skittles in his front pocket for Chad. Zimmerman could not be reached for a comment on Wednesday evening at the phone number listed for him on the community's newsletter. Crump said the family is concerned that police might decide to consider the shooting as self-defense, and that police have ignored the family's request for a copy of the original 911 call, which they think will shed light on the incident. If the 911 protocol costs the county or the country hell to farm here, they told him not to get involved. Damn, it's high. He disobeyed that order, said Ryan Jillison, a spokesperson for the family. Zimmerman didn't have to get out of his car, said Crump, who was prepared a public records lawsuit to file on Thursday if the family doesn't get the 911 tape. If he never gets out of his car, there is no reason for self-defense. Trayvon only has Skittles. He has a gun. Since Trayvon, a high school junior who wanted to be a pilot, was black and Zimmerman was white, Crump said race is the 600-pound elephant in the room. Why is this kid suspicious in the first place? I think a stereotype must have been placed on the kid, Crump said. The article got our story out of Florida. In one stroke, it was a national story. Reuters gave us credibility and national distribution for our message. This was a story of justice denied, and of justice denied an innocent child shot to death in the night with no one arrested, no one held accountable. On the same day the Reuters story was published, Ryan Jillison had arranged for me to be interviewed about the case on CBS This Morning. Unbelievably, the next morning, March 8th, Charlie rose at his desk in the New York City studio of the nationally televised show was talking about Trayvon. The parents of the teenager who was shot and killed near Orlando last month will hold a news conference today. He said they are outraged that no one has been arrested in the case, that has serious racial overtones. Mark Stressman is in Sanford, Florida. Mark, good morning. I was standing with the reporter at the retreat in Twin Lakes. This was my debut on television, but I wasn't yet out of the fog of grief. Just a few weeks ago, I never would have conceived any of this, of my son's death or the official stonewalling that followed it, or me standing by the patch of grass where my son was killed, speaking to the entire nation on television. He was laying right here, wasn't he? The reporter asked me, adding, "It must be a little still kind of odd to be here." He asked me, "Yeah, it is." I said, I didn't know what else to say. The reporter then told the national television audience the facts of the story. 17-year-old Trayvon Martin, Trey to his family, lived in Miami. He loved horses and trained to become a pilot. The high school junior was visiting relatives last month when he was shot and killed outside the gated subdivision of townhomes. He meant the world to me. He meant the world to his mother, I said. And it just said that he's been taken away from us. He was just up here just to relax. He wasn't up here to return home in a body bag. And that's just the part that really tears me up. Excuse me. I was starting to find my voice, even though I knew it wasn't coming out exactly right. The reporter went on. When Trey was only 9, he pulled his father from a burning kitchen, said the reporter. I hadn't expected this, but the camera was on me and I knew I had to say something. I just didn't know what was going to come out of my mouth or if I could even hold it together to talk. We had been told by Crump and Jillison that there might be tough questions, but I hadn't had time to prepare. I looked at the reporter and felt something uncontrollable welling inside me. I broke down and cried on national television. He was my hero. You know what I'm saying. I said my son saved my life, and for me not to be able to save his life is just it's hard. My kid went to the morgue, and this guy went home and went to sleep in his bed. I said, there is no justice in that. The crazy thing about it is, no, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure people still talk about with all the other killings that happened. Um, Still to this day, no justice. I mean, the family is doing their thing. I follow I follow his mother on Instagram and whatever, and I know they still doing events and stuff like that. But it's like, damn, still no justice. The reporter finished by telling the television audience Sanford police hope to finish up their case and get it to local prosecutors by this weekend. They are not releasing a half dozen 911 calls until the investigation is complete. And Charlie, we told on one of those calls you can hear the sound of a gunshot. The fuse was now burning faster. After the CPS this morning taping, we received calls from many more media outlets. At this point, I said this was, I'm sorry. At this point, I had no idea what was ahead of me. I knew that it would take more than me to get the world to hear me out or care about my son's story. I knew that Sabrina would have to gather herself and accompany me to tell our side of the story. And that would take some convincing. The day after the CBS This Morning segment aired, we held a press conference with attorneys Ben Crump and Natalie Jackson. My nephew Booby, who held Trayvon's framed football jersey, Brandy Green, and me in front of Natalie Jackson's office in Orlando. I told the cluster of mostly local newspaper and television reporters about Trayvon, what had happened to him, and how it seemed that nothing was being done about it. My emotions were raw, and my words passionate, and I hope that the reporters could feel my love and greed for my fallen son. I'm sorry, y'all. These some long chapters, and it's a lot to read. It's senseless, I said to a press conference. We feel justice hasn't been served. Trump, Trump called the killer a loose cannon, and then he said, "Why? Why did he follow Trayvon? Why did he confront him? Why was the neighborhood watch volunteer patrolling his neighborhood with a gun? And then Trayvon didn't fight back after being confronted. What was wrong with that?" As attorney Nellie Jackson said in a press conference, Trayvon didn't know the neighborhood watch captain had a gun. Shortly after our first conference in Orlando, Crump called Reverend Al Sharpton. Crump and Sharpton knew each other from the case of Martin Lee Anderson, a 14-year-old black boy killed at the boot camp style detention center in Panama City, Florida. But Reverend Sharpton had never been to Sanford before. Crump called him asking for his help in our case, and he certainly had never heard of us or Trayvon. But he recognized injustice when he heard it, and he listened oh my God, as Crump spoke his usual blue streak at the first time they discussed the death of our son. "I want you to talk with the father," Crump had told Reverend Sharpton. And I got on the phone and told the famous Reverend what happened and how there is no resort, resort, I can't talk, no records with those in authority. I began crying on the phone, and Reverend Sharpton was moved to action. He booked us on an MSNBC television show, Politics Nation, and Crump and I taped a segment from Stanford. "The family is calling for justice," I said on the show. "We don't want our son's death to be in vain. We're looking for answers. I don't have an understanding as to why my son is dead to this day. Not long after that show, Reverend Sharpton told Sabrina and me he didn't believe in drive-by activism. If we're going to be, if we're going to be in it, we're going to be in it till we win. He said, and we're going to win because we have no other choice. We cannot allow the legal precedent to be established in a city, I mean in Sanford, that tells us it is legal for a man to kill us, tell any story he wants, and walk out with a murder weapon. The Reverend's words were true, and we didn't have to fight just against the legal proceeding, but a cultural one too. One thing this case revealed to us was that a kid could be killed in a country, this country, and people would step up and defend the killer. Not only some twisted members of the public, online bloggers, and racists, but even some police officers. What is it about this country that allows that to happen? But we also discovered that we weren't alone in thinking this was crazy. So many people at this rally drove 2 hours, 8 hours to make a statement that no, this won't stand. And people like Reverend Sharpton have stood behind us the whole way. Soon, the Sanford Police Department would claim that the killer hadn't been arrested due to the stand your ground law. I came to understand that the law meant that if you feel your life is being, hold on, that your life is being threatened, you could defend yourself by shooting your assailant. The problem that I had with this was if this was a stand your ground law, a stand your ground case, if the killer was in true and immediate fear for his life, why did he follow my son? Why did he try and confront the person who caused such fear? Outrageous Shark instead of the stand your ground defense. I can't, and for the life of me, understand how they can justify not making an arrest. Arrest does not, conviction. But there is probable cause here, even in it with the stand your ground law that we would question. This is a national outrage to many of us. Then the show was over, and once again the sounds began. No arrest, no justice, nothing. I did hear from some of my friends who had seen me in Attorney Crump on television. Who is this dude? One of them ads mentioned Crump's accent and manner of speaking. They didn't understand the brilliance of this man. The police, despite their initial assurances, had given up on the idea of arresting the killer, claiming that Florida law prevented it. The recommendation of the Sanford Police Department investigator Chris Sereno had been to at least charge the killer with manslaughter, but even that recommendation was not addressed. When the lead investigator is essentially telling you, I have enough information and evidence to at least arrest the individual for manslaughter, but then his superiors seem to be saying to you, no, we're not going to do anything. It left us with nothing in hand at all. At least of all any trust in the judicial system to bring light to the crime committed against our child. We didn't have faith in that process at all. We were being told both in words and in actions. It's already happened. There's nothing to do or see here. Go back home to Miami. Don't worry about this. But Crumb said, no, we're not going away. We're going to make the world pay attention. And it was working. After the show with Reverend Sharpton, Crumb told me that I did final television. Still, I was only half the story. The other half, Trayvon's mother, Sabrina, was still in her house in Miami, still unable to fully understand, much less speak publicly about the terrible events that had left her son dead. We had to get Sabrina involved. Crump told me she's a mother and people need to hear from her. They need to hear from both of you. Alright now, y'all. I done read enough. That was a lie. That was a lie. I'm going to place this book here. And I'm going to have to get back to y'all tomorrow because I've been on here for 2 hours trying to get through this book. 2 hours and 15 minutes and some seconds trying to get through this book. I'm going to have to get back to y'all tomorrow. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified. If you want to donate, my Cash App is Kashmere Majesty 26. Please share my videos with friends and family. Help me build my subscribers up. But I'm going to have to get back to y'all some other time because that was a lot.